Alright, going back to this, another interesting thing I wanted to say was um, these two quadrants are life, these two are death. But one thing I want to say is that, like me, I've always been most attracted to females on the left side, the idealists and guardians, I think. But it doesn't really matter to me, just so long as the girl's attractive. And I think that this has to do with Darwinism. According to biologists, the reason why men look mostly for looks is because they can have a lot of kids with a lot of women, and um, they just want the women that look good, the good genes. But according to biologists, the women, and this actually isn't really true, I think that the women look mostly for the flow. But according to biologists, the women look more for comfort and for money, social connections, these types of things in a man, and that would be more these two quadrants, because they're looking more for their kids, that they want their kids to survive more. The men, they want hot chicks that they can, and they want a lot of hot chicks. But the women, they want their kids to survive and have shelter and good resources and all this stuff. But really, I actually kind of disagree with that. My experience in the world has indicated to me so clearly that women actually look mostly for the flow, and men even look for the flow. But I could describe that, but I don't want to describe that because I don't want to mess people up by getting too much into it. But all right. Let's see. Oh, but talking about why men might want women who are more of these quadrants, because remember I said they're more faithful, they don't question things as much, they quote unquote more gullible. I've already indicated actually this isn't true. These quadrants, these people in these quadrants, the reason why they have believed a lot of these religions is because there's truth involved, and they have a inclination, a proclivity to understand the truth and to uphold it. And they protect the truth. So this is why they like Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, because all these religions are quadrant based. They have the truth involved in them. They have these principles, metaphors that are timeless, and this is why they have been following them and maintaining these religions. But like I was saying, the idea though is that they are more gullible and they're more loyal. They will follow orders and demands. So and they're worried about appearances and things like this. So thinking of raising children, this is stereotypically what you would want. You would want a wife who is clean, who is wanting to please, to help the children out. This is why I think stereotypically these quadrants are seen more as ideal women. These quadrants are seen more as ideal males. The more spontaneous, I don't care what people think, that type of stuff. This one's more conservative and moral, Alright, so what was I going to say though? I wanted to talk about the quadrant in terms of the kosher laws. So we have, if something has a cleft hoof and chews its cud, then you can eat it. An example would be a cow. If it has a cleft hoof but doesn't chew its cud, I'll put that cleft hoof doesn't chew its cud, then it is you can't eat it. An example would be a pig. The other two examples would be it doesn't have a cleft hoof and it chews its cud. Well, you can't eat that. And the other example would be it doesn't have a cleft hoof and it chews its cud. I don't know. There's 4 examples. There's 4 possibilities. I don't want to draw it out because it takes time. But these are the 4 possibilities. There's only one possibility that's allowed. That's if it has a cleft hoof and it chews its cud. So people think, oh, these kosher laws they're just random. What's the deal with these laws? No, there's actually the form involved in the laws. One example too is in Leviticus. It says that it names 3 animals that you can't eat, and a fourth, or it names 4 animals. And the first 3, nobody knows what animals they were because the Hebrew, they can't translate it. And then the 4th one, they know what animal it is. But once again, you have the form, the way that they describe it. You also have the form in terms of what fish you can eat. So if it has fins and scales, you can eat it. But there's the other 4 possibilities. It doesn't have fins, it doesn't have scales. It has fins, it has scales. It has fins, it doesn't have scales. It doesn't have scales, it has fins. But you're allowed to eat only one of these 4 options if it has fins and has scales. So people think these laws are random. Actually, these laws are not random. And Jesus said in the story, he says in the story of Matthew that he came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law. The law is quadrant based. Alright, what else do we got? Okay, so we're talking about philosophy. What are the things I want to talk about? Okay, so like Plato. Plato in the Republic described the ideal society. I want to say I read all the books. I wrote down in my phone all the books I read, but then something happened to my phone, lost all that information, so now it kind of sucks. I have to maybe reread them or something because I read almost all the books, like half of the books, but now I don't know what books I read. I don't know what books I didn't read, so it's kind of frustrating. But I read probably about 75% of his stuff. And it's all quadrant based. It's all the form. It's amazing. You think that I'm making it up? I'm not making it up. But one of the things I want to say that was interesting that Plato talked about, he talked about the ideal society. And in this ideal society, he originally stated in the Republic that there would be 3 types of people. 3 classes. So it would be a stratified society with 3 classes. But then later in the Republic, he describes, because the Republic is a kind of a poetic story. It's kind of like a novel. It's ironic because Plato says that in the ideal society there would be no art, but his actual Republic is a work of art. But the interesting thing is he says that there would be 3 classes in the society, but then later in the Republic he says that this society does not work, and he says that there would be a problem. He says that it would be a eugenics-based society, but he says that there's going to be a problem. There would be a problem in this 3-class society with the genetic number that's required for the eugenic operations. So he says that the 3-class society is destroyed. It doesn't work. But then he proposes later there is a society that could work though. He says think of it like this. He says that there's one class called the bird. Like, I forget what animals it uses, but let's just pretend it's a bird. I think it was. One class is the eagle class. One class is the lion class. I forget what animals it uses, but let's just say this. He says the other class is the human class. So we have 3 classes. He says that this society didn't work. He said, let's put these 3 within a 4th class. He says, let's put it within a giant human, and this is the 4th class. So we have 4 classes. Now, he says that this society would be the perfect society. Remember I told you that in this society we have the idealists, guardians, artisans, and rationals. The 4th quadrant encompasses the previous 3. And the way I see it is the rationals, I'm going to get this more later, but in a perfect society it would be based around this. And the rationals would be the kings, and they would, because rationals, they don't care, they would not have property. This is how Plato described the philosopher kings. He said they would not have property, they would not be worried about, about their clothes and stuff. They don't care about stuff like this. They're the opposite of what the rulers of our society are now. And all they care about is the truth. So it would be these types of people who would be ideal to rule society. Guys like Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson were NTs. But nowadays in society, you don't find a lot of NTs as leaders in society because they don't want to have to deal with it. Because they really just want to seek the truth, so you find them more in positions like professors and stuff like this. But in the ideal society, Socrates says that the philosophers, the philosopher kings, who I think he's referring to, the rationals, they would lead. So Socrates talks about the 3 within the 4th. And then the amazing thing about this picture, though, is think about this. This person right here would have 3 people within him, right? If you want to look at it that way, because this is the human. He has the bird, the lion, and the human within him. And then he has the human within him has the lion. And then this guy might be within a human, and he might be next to a bird and a lion. So the idea is this is actually a fractal that Socrates illustrated. And just going into chaos theory, I forgot to mention chaos theory when I was talking about physics. Chaos theory also fits the quadrant perfectly. Everything does. But there's a phenomenon in chaos theory called bifurcations. I'm not expert with this stuff, but I'll just say how it fits the form. The first bifurcation that you see in systems, I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but the first one is normal. The second one is normal. The third one, it gets a little different, but it's still normal. Then the 4th bifurcation, it starts to get a little strange, but you can still predict it. It's still kind of normal. But then once you get to the 5th bifurcation, you can't predict anything. So once again, we have the form. This is chaos in chaos theory. Interestingly, I'll just say one more story that Plato talked about, or Plato had, is the story of Meno. Dang it, this pen is running out of ink. Oh, man. So, alright, in the story of Meno, Plato describes knowledge. And he says that, well, one thing, remember, we're talking about knowledge. Plato describes that we already know everything. He says that we know everything before we're even born. He says that instead of learning things, we actually just recall them. And the way he explains this is kind of he says we're from the world of the forms. That's all that there is to know. So we already know everything. So when we're in this world, the most that we can do is just recall what we knew in the world of the forms. And he says that, remember I said there's one form. The form of the good. And I think that is the quadrant. Or the cross. But, so he's talking to this slave kid named Meno. And he's trying to explain to Meno that the soul is eternal and that we know everything. Because the soul is originally in this world of the forms. And the way he does this is ultimately he draws, he's drawing geometric things in the sand. And Meno can understand it all. And Meno's a slave child. And what Plato was illustrating is this slave child never learned geometry in his life. But he understands what I'm showing him. And he says, therefore, he must have already known this before he was born. Because he's never learned any geometry before. So therefore, his knowledge was innate. It's an interesting argument about knowledge. Knowledge is the fourth quadrant. And we talk about the shamans when they have their death experiences, they go to this higher realm and they come back and they draw quadrants. But what Socrates ends up drawing in the sand in the end is he draws 16 squares. And then after he does this, he says, "See, I have proven the soul is immortal." So once again, we have the quadrant model. So is there anything else I want to talk about with this? I wanted to say quickly, I studied mathematics. You got the four-color theorem that says that, before people thought that you could draw any map with just 5 colors without any of these colors touching each other. And there's a proof for that. And they tried to see if you could do it with 4 colors. And they couldn't make a proof for it. They used a computer and they made the proof. So you can draw any map with 4 colors. And then there's all this other mathematics stuff, all the big mathematics stuff, including Fermat's last theorem, everything based on the form. But I'm not going to get into it too much. That could be studied. It could be shown perfectly. But everything is based on the form, the quadrant. Now, one thing I want to say, though, is like you have the quadratic equation. The quadratic equation uses FOIL, the FOIL method, the first, outer, inner, last. So AX plus B